Thank you for joining us today for 10 Minutes with the Artist, a discussion about the art practice and the personal vision that guides artists. On today's episode, we're proud to have George Smith, who is completing a thesis in architecture at North Dakota State University. We invited him here today to speak about his research and the creation of artifacts in preparation for his defense. Cosmic Mundi returns us to the core of our existence, the why. The why that is full of wonder, the why that looks outward, the why that allows us to see clearly our place among the many strings that connect this universe. Through an exploration of time, space, and perception, George's artifact disrupts the known world and reminds us to once again look up, look around, and look beyond ourselves. I'm Anthony Ferris, and this is 10 Minutes. Hello, George, and thank you very much for joining us for 10 Minutes with the Artist.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So the world is full of a number of phenomenon that I can't really explain, that are just sort of full of wonder as far as I'm concerned. Most of them are systems like democracy or capitalism. I was curious if these sorts of systems replaced wonder and spirituality and a connection with the cosmos, or did something else happen?
I think for me, it all stems from a correlation of spirituality, and within our consciousness. There's so much wonder within our consciousness, and it's almost as if there's a certain echelon that spirituality lives within that is above us, and we almost try and cope with it in a way and create like a very humanistic solution to things like that. And I think that's why certain things like religion are, they've stemmed so much hatred. I'm not a proponent of religion nor somebody who bashes it in any way, but I'm saying that religion itself it tends to be something that people stem hate from, and almost a lot of, what would you say, greed. So I think that really it comes down to that, and having the humanistic overtake that kind of occurs.
So are you saying that with one, like the cosmos or wonder, there's a binding aspect, and with systems, there's a dividing?
Yeah, and the binding is almost, that thing that we can't separate from, which would be our umwelt, or the world we live within, and we're kind of trapped within, the wonder that we find there. And then I think that these systems that stem from it are systems that just traditionally come from this human conception, and almost taking the negative qualities of being and trying to create like this order within maybe a misconstrued conception of what spirituality really should be.
So what do you think that the cosmos can teach me that infinite scroll on Instagram can't?
By far, it's all about, your own perspective. It's this perspective that the cosmos can give you of such a important, you have such an importance, but you're still so extremely small, and you're so unknown beyond that point where, that little clicking scroll that happens, where it's like that little updating happening on, say, any kind of social media. It just seems to be a completely composed and really derivative form of trying to find something like that, and to try and reform a perspective or reform an experience that really just can't actually occur within our holistic world.
So, part of this conversation about the cosmic or the axis mundi is this discussion of the place in between. Do we require that, And what happens if we don't have that?
Oh, it's absolutely necessary. I mean, without that, we don't exist because, well, without it, the spiritual or like the sacred doesn't actually exist. It takes that threshold to cross to become, to transfer in from the non-sacred to the sacred for it to really have any importance. I think that's in general with all of life. Nothing is ever taken on with this straight homogenous approach to where everything is all the same and there's no difference. There's no difference between this space and the next. I think in a very modern man and as well as like ancient man method, we create these certain locations that have importance to us and give us direction throughout our life, in which really all of our orientation stems from.
So do you think that this happens in our society from things that we know really well, or things that we just don't understand?
Um, I think that in the vast history of society and of humanity, that the the understanding of knowledge and knowing is actually a pretty large illusion, especially in modern society, in which we understand things extremely scientifically. And in my project, in my artifact, in my architecture, I and how ancient man had things such as mountains, rivers, and trees to look to, almost as that axis mundi, in which they could find orientation and metaphorically relate it to, a higher power. And as we've begun to know things more scientifically, and to discover that the trees are actually made up of these certain cells and these certain molecules and these certain atoms, we almost have this misconception that we understand why all of that happens. Um, and I think that when we look into the cosmos, there's that infinite beyond that we never have the complete feeling of knowing, which I think in turn flips around on us and gives us a chance to almost have an out of body experience and look back on ourselves and think, this whole knowledge that I've constructed is not actually as solid as I might have assumed at first.
So when I look up in the sky, my feeling is, well, this is not about my feeling, this is what I see visually, is that everything is flat. Everything is at an equal distance to me as far as I can sort of tell. So why does your artifact have any sort of dimension to it?
It's absolutely in the realm of perspective and the specific orientation that you're experiencing in the moment that you're experiencing it, and understanding that just like on Earth, we do not have this homogeneous, this homogeneous experience. Space doesn't have that either. It may be in our first glance perspective, but the more that you experience this cosmic air, this cosmic phenomenon, and you look into the stars, just like our ancestors did, these stars, certain ones start to stick out and have certain importances. And I think if you look back on time, there's countless myths that actually fueled spirituality and fueled what would be, a religious take, and it fueled really the entire perspective of life, within the seasons, within predicting the future and things like that. And I think that my artifact itself tries to give you that center point where you can pick something within it and you can create this string in which you see that this point connects to this point and this point, giving you a starting point and a direction to go from there.
Well, George, thank you so very much. One of the things that we like to do at the very end of our conversation is ask a few questions about sort of your creative practice. So what time of day do you feel like you're most creative?
That all stems from the nighttime. For some reason, I just have like an urge that kind of kicks from the whole day. You have all this buildup, and that those wee hours of the night that you're working, they're all informed throughout your experience of the day. And I think that fuel just kind of builds off of itself instead of starting with a fresh slate.
Do you listen to any type of music or anything like that when you're creating?
Absolutely everything. I think it's important to not be strictly into just this one specific, genre or anything like that. I think, this might sound a little bit deep of a thought just on your selection of music, but I think you should really be diving into all these different realms in order to, as an architect and as a, somebody who would be doing any kind of creation of art, you should be really experiencing a full realm of culture and step outside of your own comfortability.
Are you reading anything right now?
I'm reading quite a bit. I think right now, one thing that's really applying to both my thesis and my architecture would actually be called the book Dirt. And basically, it's really talking about how the creation of dirt was cosmic, and our relationship with dirt is cosmic in the way that we try and we always have had that relation with Mother Nature and returning back into the soil and returning back into the cosmos.
So each of you worked in a different medium. So what was probably the most challenging thing about working in your medium?
For me, it was definitely stepping into something familiarity. It's almost as if the medium stemmed from a conception that really just was a trial. This projection that was occurring and, these sheets coming down, it was really just trying to create a threshold in which somebody could pass from one space into another, while actually doing it in a physical sense. And I traditionally, I'm a woodworker, so I traditionally work with that kind of physicality. And in this way, it's almost as if the physicality I was working with was much more hard to manipulate, much more difficult to manipulate, and it seemed to inform me much more than I tried to extract an information from it.
And I guess my last question for you would be, what's next?
What's next? I think really it's just trying to not fall away from this, sticking into this really extremely meaningful architecture in a way that, as Stephen Wisher would say, if you can't look outside the window, and if you can look outside the window and say that nothing is wrong with the world, then you probably shouldn't be an architect. And I think that's quite true in the way that we're studying right now and the way that we're trying to develop theses. And I think it's also extremely important going beyond this to not forget that and to remain non-complacent and to keep improving the world and keep finding the places in which humanity can definitely improve.
Did Stephen tell you that I told him that?
Did you tell him that?
Very wise, though. George, thank you so very much for your time. And I'd also like to thank everybody for their time and interest in the professional practice and the creative explorations happening here at North Dakota State University. So thank you. And for everyone here at the Memorial Union Gallery, keep creative.